I have a story I think you'll enjoy. This was told to me by my grandfather, who had heard it from his father, so it's actually my great grandfather's story, and it's possible that a few details have blurred over the last century, but I think we'll have more fun if we take it at face value. My great grandfather had been a New York police officer in the early 1910s. At this time, the New York subway was only about a decade old. The stations weren't yet the filthy pits they would later become. The train cars were nothing like the cold, dirty, metal ones you see today. You have to imagine these shining wooden cars with interiors made up of golds and browns. There were wicker seat pads and ceiling fans and incandescent lights. Kerosene lanterns were used as headlights. They were meant to be luxurious. One night, well past midnight, passengers were waiting at the end of the line when they heard a horrible crash from inside the subway tunnel. The station attendants notified the other stations to stop all trains, then they got down onto the track and cautiously went inside to investigate. A short time later, they came running back out and said that the train had crashed. The police and ambulances were called. Now, my great-grandfather was not among the responders that night, but the story of what happened very quickly started to spread around the precinct. When police reached the train, they found that it had completely derailed. It was all crushed and crumpled up. Now, a common reason for a train to derail would be because the operator, which would have been referred to as a motorman back then, was not properly controlling the speed. Just like nowadays, you have to take turns at a cautious speed or you may jump the track. However, in this case, they couldn't find the motorman. They couldn't find anybody. There was no one inside the train. There was no one in the tunnel or on the tracks. People waiting at the closest station didn't see anyone come out of the tunnel and climb onto the platform. It was a ghost train. But it was a fact that the train had not been empty before it had crashed. It's estimated there were roughly 150 people on the train who had simply vanished. Over the next several weeks, an investigation played out where police found and interviewed as many people as they could who had seen the train before it had crashed. The timeline that they pieced together began 4 stations from the last. The train pulled into that first station as normal. People got off, people got on. But there was one person that people noticed in particular waiting on the platform when the train arrived. They described him as a gaunt man in black clothing that looked antiquated. He wore a very wide-brimmed hat. He carried a satchel in one hand and a book in the other that looked like it might have been a Bible. Some people thought he was a minister or possibly a missionary, and other people thought he might just be a Bible salesman. And people took note of him because of the way that he was dressed and not because of anything he was doing. When the train arrived and people started to get on, he got onto the middle car. Then the doors closed and the train left the station, again, just like normal. At the second station, the train arrived without incident and people began to get off. And these people ended up being of very high interest to the police because they would be the last people to get off the train. Now, there were 5 cars on this particular train. People who got off the cars on the 2 ends, so the first and 5th cars, reported nothing out of the ordinary. People who got off the 2nd and 4th cars reported feeling uneasy. They had felt anxious as they had been traveling down the tunnel, though none of them could say exactly why. The passengers who had gotten off the 3rd car, the middle car, said that they had felt extremely uncomfortable. And they specifically attributed this to the gaunt man with the black old-fashioned clothes and the wide-brimmed hat. He had not taken a seat, so he was standing at the middle of the car, which meant he was in the exact center of the train. For some reason, people were very put off by him. He would glance around from side to side and occasionally make eye contact with people, which they found extremely unnerving. And generally, passengers avoided looking at him. Some people said they thought he might have said something at some point, though if he had, they weren't sure if he had been speaking to anyone in particular or what it was he had said. His presence was making people so uncomfortable, a couple of them had actually gotten off the train even though they had not reached their destination. Aside from all this, nothing out of the ordinary happened at this station. People got off, people got on, and then the train left. When it arrived at the third station, witnesses said the passengers looked very uneasy. Even at the two end cars, people could be seen through the windows with very nervous expressions on their faces. And in the middle car, passengers were piled up at the doors at the center and on the two ends, just packed together, ready to get off the second the train stopped. But the doors didn't open. Back then, subway doors didn't open automatically. They had to be manually opened by doormen on the inside, but they couldn't get them open. People in the middle car started to panic. They were shoving against one another, pressing against the doors. Some of them started banging on the windows. Station attendants went up to the doors to see if they could help get them open, but they just stayed closed. The attendants said that the people on the inside were screaming at them, begging them for help. When they were interviewed later, the station workers were specifically asked if they had seen the man in black, and one worker, who was very shaken up, said he saw something in black. Though when pressed, he couldn't say what it was that he meant by that. Then the train suddenly started up and drove away from the station, with the people inside still banging on the windows. At the fourth station, the last station before the crash, witnesses said the train came barreling out one end of the tunnel, completely past the station, and plunged into the other end of the tunnel. And even over the sound of the engine and the metal wheels, the passengers could be heard screaming. Since it went by so fast, it was hard to see what was going on inside, but it looked to people who were on the platform that the passengers were running frantically around the cars. And a few witnesses said they saw something else. Again, they were only able to see inside for a couple seconds, but it looked to them like there were long things, like arms, writhing around throughout the train. One woman described it as a lattice work of bending, flopping arms with black sleeves, moving through all the cars. Then the train was gone, and a few moments later, the people on the platform heard the crash. None of the people on the train were ever found, and no one was ever able to identify the gaunt man in black. Well, that one was fun, wasn't it? And if you liked it, then I assume that you enjoy macabre things in general, and that perhaps you'd like to help this burgeoning channel. And so I would like to tell you about an event happening this October called Haunted Soiree, a macabre cocktail party. If you're looking for a slightly unusual experience this Halloween season, something different from the traditional jump scare mazes, then this might just be the thing for you. You'll enter a haunted house where you'll enjoy signature cocktails, roaming spirits, strange creatures, mentalists, magicians, live music, burlesque. There are some areas that are more overtly frightening than others, which you can explore or avoid at your discretion. And tying it all together is an eerie story that is yours to uncover. The event is now open in 7 cities throughout the United States. If you're interested in going, visit hauntedsoiree.com. And if you want to help support a friend of a friend, use the code MICAHD. That's MICAHD when checking out, so they'll know who sent you. This would be very appreciated. And with that, I will say good night.